All right, so at this point, I think One and Murata are setting up, or should I say continuing to set up the final arc of One Punch Man, especially lately in the series. I mean, I know we've been focusing on the Tatsumaki and Saitama stuff, but there's been stuff in the background as well. Now that we've also got introduced to all of this Esper stuff with Tsukuyomi and them making Espers, I think it's revealed to us the 3 paths of God. And I've talked about this before, where he has like those 2 solid paths. By paths, I mean like him creating monsters in the world, as well as possibly creating cyborgs with the organization, all that stuff. Like he's pulling the strings behind both of those. And now we see Espers are part of that as well. So those are like the 3 facets of God. They have all been set up now, and that's where all the series is leaded. Like we're gonna have this one big war where it's essentially like the heroes / humans adjacent versus cyborgs, Espers, and monsters at the end. And of course, there's gonna be like the elite amongst them. And that's what we're mainly gonna be talking about in this video. It's gonna be like God's elite, like S-class, Akatsuki, Espada, whatever you want to call it. He's going to have like his own team, in my opinion, at the end, and it's being set up right now as we speak. So to talk about this, I've got Anime Anxiety with me, and he actually brought up another candidate that I didn't think would be on here, but now it totally makes sense, and we'll get to it. So I'll put the list on the screen right here, and I know a lot of you are probably gonna be looking at this like, this doesn't make sense. Well, what even is this? How are they gonna show up at the end? Well, we'll get into it. So also another disclaimer I gotta put out there, we're gonna be going into webcomic stuff in this video, which is technically spoilers for what's going to happen in the future of the series. Although the webcomic is a different continuity than manga, it still is going to touch on the same story points. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want to know anything and you just want to stay, faithful to the manga, probably don't want to watch this. But if you don't care and you want to know like crazy deep cut stuff that's going to happen a few years into the future, then watch the video. So first, we've got Fuzzy. Now, a lot of you probably aren't familiar with Fuzzy because he is a webcomic character, one of the newer ones. But it turns out that Fuzzy is the grandson of Shibawa, the great seer that we're introduced to in season 1. She had all those predictions and everything, and she eventually died choking on a cough drop when she had predicted the end of the world, the big thing, the 6 months prophecy that the series revolves around. So he apparently is the true leader of the Neo Heroes, which is interesting. And that's pretty much all we really know about him at this point. He has a lot of respect. He has like markings on him, which are interesting. But that's, like I said, that's all we know. So I think me and Anime Anxiety feel the same about Fuzzy. And I won't even say it, I'll just let you say it. So who do you think Fuzzy like truly is, at least even correlating to where the manga is currently?
Yeah, I feel like, especially with, considering the end of the series, like how God is more than likely going to have like his own cadre, quote unquote. I feel like much with like the Monster Association, how Psychos was behind everything, like there has to be this prime, this top tier Esper that's kind of behind everything that's, that's going to be going on with God's resurrection. So what I think is that, seeing as how we can assume that he has like the same third eye ability as Shibabawa, like we haven't seen him use it, of course, but it's stated in the webcomic that he does have it. I feel like God needs some sort of Esper that has that like upper echelon ability, like the ability to see into the future, into this 4th dimensional space where, we can assume that God potentially exists in, and he kind of seems to be like the catalyst that is going to set everything into motion. He definitely has that vibe where he's like kind of the puppeteer behind the scenes, kind of making everything happen as everything else is in the forefront of the story. So I personally think that Fuzzy's going to have like a huge role going forward, and it might be pretty soon in the webcomic, but I think at the very least he's going to be the one that like actually communicates with God and gets his resurrection kickstarted.
Do you think that Fuzzy is the leader of Tsukuyomi?
That I was thinking that if it's not Apollo, because I mean he's kind of too weak to be the leader at this point, but there is room for him to kind of get a power buff there. But see, like the way it looks like right now, it does seem like Fuzzy might be behind the Tsukuyomi and the invisible hand that we also kind of get alluded to in the manga. So that would make perfect sense, because I mean he's like the epitome of Esper, like what it seems like they're looking for. So that would make a ton of sense.
Yeah, we don't really have too much on Fuzzy right now, but I mean, like I said, but he is suspicious. AF.
Yeah,
he's definitely a bad guy. I think it would be a twist if he was actually a good guy. But continuing with the Espers here, another member of Gods Akatsuki, who is kind of like already a part of it, if anything, Psychos. So I know that she's currently being interrogated by Fubuki in the webcomic. Like, that's pretty crazy. Like, the beginning of that story is just starting in the manga now, and it still hasn't resolved in the webcomic. But
right.
I think that Psychos is eventually going to break free from Fubuki and join up with God again. Intentionally, unintentionally, it's going to happen. And I do think that she will eventually have her face turned, but it won't be until like the very end of the series. Like, I thought that it was going to happen sooner, but I do think that she is going to join God again and fight Fubuki at the end. And that brings me to another point about all of these characters that we're going to be discussing, like God's cadres. They're also representing like the final opponents of the significant characters in the series. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them. So Fuzzy, I don't really know who he could be the final opponent of, but Psychos for sure is the final opponent of Fubuki. And Apollo, I also think is the final opponent of Tatsumaki. Like, that was actually recently set up, in my opinion, like in chapter 179, when Fuzzy's like driving away from the Hero Association after escaping. He's like, I'll get you again, Tatsumaki. You know,
right,
you and your dog, whatever they say. So yeah, I think he's gonna come back stronger, of course, because if they can make Espers, I'm sure there's ways of, enhancing
them. You're right.
For sure. So yeah, do you think Psychos is going to be a part of this team at the end too?
Yeah, I mean, she kind of has to be, right? Like, just because she literally unlocks the third eye ability, like we see it happen, and that's when she goes completely insane because sees the future, or sees God pretty much. So especially since she got that, like, it's never specifically said during the arc, but it seems like she got some kind of massive power buff when she merged with Orochi, and it seems like that was kind of God's doing. It makes it, it's heavily alluded to that that's the case. So I just feel like she has too many connections to him for her to just, have a face turn before any of that resolved. It might be something like she escapes Fubuki at some point and kind of kickstarts his resurrection, kind of like I think maybe Fuzzy or Apollo would, or, potentially like another catalyst to get things going. But I truly think that an Esper will be like responsible for kickstarting all of this stuff. And Psychos definitely still has like a lot of like potential to be a really big tool for God. And Apollo even said himself when he was claiming Psychos at the research facility that her third eye ability, along with the mutation she had, potentially God's influence, it's like super important to their research. So there has to be a specific reason for that, right?
Yeah, that's a great point that you bring up too. Yeah, I actually totally forgot that was even a thing, but yeah, it is. That makes it even more intriguing now, because yeah, the third eye is definitely like this two-way communication between God. Like, it's like his Discord channel that he has that only like certain people have access to. And we'll actually get into that into the next one, believe it or not, because I think we've seen other characters communicate with God through this third eye ability without it directly being mentioned. So we've got Fuzzy, Psychos, Apollo, and now we're gonna get into like the big wild card here, but he's the most fun, and that's Phoenix Man. So yeah, I feel like the people watching this video are going to be split on this, because there's like, the people who have been following the manga for like a couple years now, they're familiar with Phoenix Man. And then there's like the people that probably started reading after the pandemic or, something like that, and they're really not familiar with the true Phoenix Man. They only know the Phoenix Man that we've seen recently. Like, he fights Child Emperor and he becomes the Penguin and he's all goofy, and then Saitama shows up and he eventually gets tickled and turns into like a little chick.
Right. Chick Man.
Exactly. Right. So it wasn't like that before. It was very different.
No.
Phoenix Man before the retcons, he was one of the strongest characters ever. Like, unbelievable. And that's one of the reasons why they retconned him, in my opinion, because he was way too powerful, but also because it revealed too much about the future of the story, as well as like what's really going on, in my opinion. I will get into that now, because I don't think the true Phoenix Man, Brilliant Eagle Phoenix Man, or I think they call him Diamond Eagle or something in the Viz, but the chick version of Phoenix Man. I don't remember the chapter it was. It was like 100 or something, I think, maybe. We didn't see what happened to him. He kind of just became the chick, and then I guess, I don't know, was scampered away or something. Like, he didn't die. We didn't see him die or anything. I mean, it's very possible he did die in the rubble of the Monster Association. It was pulled out of the ground. He's like this little, baby chick. It's not likely for him to survive, but this is manga. He's gonna survive. He's gonna get out of there. And eventually, I think he will become Brilliant Eagle Phoenix Man again, with like God's intervention. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, just because like he has so many forms, aside from that, and especially with like the retcon and everything. I always thought like there was a reason why one kind of gave him like a nerfed towards the end because, like you said, I just feel like he became way too powerful. And, you know, I really do think that form that he takes in the retcon, that Brilliant Eagle form, is actually going to be his final form at the very end of the series. And I also feel like One and Murata wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to kind of retcon his ending because, you know, I think, what was it, the first time he kind of just had his costume pulled apart and you just kind of see him as like a regular human. But in the retcon version, that's when he turns into a chick, if remembering that correctly. But I feel like they kind of reconsidered it and they were like, no, we have a plan for this guy at the end of the series. So they wanted to make sure that they left that window open for him to still have his powers. And because, you know, obviously if his costume gets ripped off, that's kind of, he's like a regular human at that point. So especially considering, like, I always like thought that it was kind of strange that Phoenix Man was able to enter this kind of like ethereal space, kind of like how Fubuki or Psychos are able to, or how we saw Homeless Emperor, you know, get confronted by God when he got his powers confiscated. It seems like a very similar area, you know, like I think Phoenix Man kind of called it his, like, the space where all these like costume people can kind of like intermingle telepathically or something. But I think there's a lot more to it. It kind of makes it seem like Phoenix Man eventually is also going to be able to communicate with God freely if he can enter this kind of space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the space that he's going to, I think he said it was like a spiritual realm or something. That's a tentative title. But the place that he's going to with Child Emperor, I think in chapter 100 or 99, one of those chapters, he's same place that like Fubuki and Psychos are going to, like when they connect in their minds. It's also, I think, the same place that we see God take Homeless Emperor, like when he kills him.
Right.
It's definitely all the same place because this is also like, I guess it's similar to what's going on with the Third Eye, like this spiritual Esper internet that he can connect to.
That's probably the best way you can put it, is like an Esper internet that only they have access to.
Exactly. And also, I think that we have already seen Phoenix Man and God collaborate because originally when we saw Brilliant Eagle Phoenix Man talking to Child Emperor, when he was explaining his suit, he was like, thanks to the whispers of my mascot suit, I can radiate life energy, invigorate it to its utmost limits, and revitalize corpses to a state of pseudo-life or something like that. I don't really get it either. So when he first said that, I was like, what does that mean? The suit is talking to him. And even at that time, I was like, that's God, right? This was like 2018, I think. So we had very little to go off of at that point. We knew way less than we did now, but it kind of like made sense that it would be God because who else would be talking to him? And now it definitely is. Like, God was communicating to him through the suit, telling him how it works and everything. But I think the smoking gun in this panel is like, when he's saying this, he's like in space and there's like this black thing above him, which I'll show you in the chat. I think this black thing above him is like supposed to maybe represent God because, you know, sometimes he takes that form of that Jupiter sphere thing.
That really makes sense. Now that you point that out, it makes a lot of sense. Because, I mean, originally you would assume like maybe that like he was talking about maybe his suit monsterifying and like literally like communicating with him to telepathically or something. But honestly, now that you pointed out, it makes so much more sense that it's actually like kind of God whispering in his ear or something, kind of putting his influence into him that way. Because, you know, just the way that Phoenix Man seems like he has like Esper abilities and how much of like a massive power up he gets when he transforms, it makes it unlikely to me that he becomes this like super powerful dragon level threat without some sort of assistance. You know, even if like the whole shtick with Phoenix Man resurrecting and becoming stronger with each death and stuff like that, still like there has to be something else involved, you know, like kind of like again with the Sairochi transformation, there is no way that like just them combining created such a powerful monster. So there had to have been, you know, hands put in from somewhere else for this transformation to really fully make sense. And yeah, I mean, really looking at this panel with that context laid out, it makes perfect sense in my opinion.
Yeah, and he does have unusual powers and abilities, unlike any other monster we've seen in the series. And it's really odd that like God specifically gave him these abilities. And also the whole thing about him bringing people back to life, that's freaking crazy. So that means that God has this ability. God can like resurrect people, and it said pseudo life, but Hellfire and Gale seemed like they were pretty much back to normal. They didn't seem, you know what, I forgot. Yes, he could bring them back as zombies at first, and then they got hit with that big lightning attack from Child Emperor that brought them back to life. Yeah, so God can make like zombies. So that's going to come
completely
back.
Forgot about that ability. That ability is so crazy. Like how that's such a broken ability, and I feel like it's totally underutilized in that whole arc. But like that definitely has to come back at some point.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. Just wasting it on Hellfire Gale just doesn't make sense. It's such a ridiculous ability. It could go so far. Yeah, this is going to come back with him. And as for final opponents, I think he's probably going to be Child Emperor's final opponent, right?
Yeah, that makes sense because they already have that rapport, like that history.
And that can clear up why Saitama kind of stole his thunder in their fight.
Yeah, definitely. It would be a perfect opportunity for Child Emperor's kind of character arc to come full circle. If, Phoenix Man comes back and, seeing as how he was kind of like trying to convince him to kind of join his side and kind of put some doubts in his mind about the Hero Association that he kind of already had and like doubts on himself that he had. So it would just make perfect sense that once Phoenix Man comes back and he's like his final opponent, that this is when Child Emperor kind of has his full character arc. So I think that would wrap it up nicely.
Absolutely, because he's definitely one of the biggest characters in need of that full arc. Like he's really struggling right now. I mean, even in the webcomic, like that's only just begun in my opinion. But definitely. Now we have, I almost don't even want to talk about this. Drive Night. I feel like we need to have an entire video dedicated to Drive Night where me and you just go over everything, because I don't think I've ever really talked to someone about Drive Night being the Mad Cyborg before, because this video is already running long. So we'll just say Drive Night's a bad guy. If you don't believe me, that's fine. Just if you don't like this, just replace Drive Night with Metal Knight. One of them is going to be
at the very least super sus. At the very least.
Yeah. So just one of them is going to be a part of this team, and they're going to be Genos' final opponent. Whoever you think is bad, it's going to be one of them. So then we got Black S. Yeah. So this is where we're kind of divided. So I think that Black S, what he's doing right now in the webcomic, which has actually started off in the manga too, we see him like playing the role of like a pet with Rover, keeping it low, staying with Saitama, living in the Hero Association with Forte, Butterfly DX, and Chain and Toad. And it's like, what's going on with him? Like so many people are confused, and a lot of questions I get about the webcomic are usually in relation to Black S and like what's going to happen with him. And I'm like 80% leaning towards he's going to be a part of this team. Like he's going to become a bad guy again once he regains his cell stock and gets his power back and, gets powered up by God. As for Rover, I don't know about him. I don't want to go too much into him because there's not really much to go off of, but he could be a part of this team too. But I'd like to think that Rover is going to stay a good guy and like be Saitama's like pet or something, like Big Rover and Saitama's pet. I don't know. That's a whole other thing. But I do think Black S is going to be powered up past Platinum S. Whatever's after
Diamond
that.
S.
Diamond S, something. We're going to see that. Cosmic S. We'll see that. But you think he might have face turn?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's just like hopium on my part, but I really do think that he is going to have this massive face turn like right at the end of the series, kind of when everything hits the fan. And for those of you that have watched Mob Psycho, kind of have like a Dimple-esque character arc or something, because he is kind of like talking about earlier the Dimple of One Punch Man. And I think there has to be at least a few characters that have this type of character arc or face turn where they were evil and they kind of just witness Saitama in his feats or whatever and kind of get to know him as a person and realize that humans aren't so bad. Especially because I feel like Black S's like whole dick is like not being looked down upon. Like he hates it when he feels like he's being looked down upon by somebody else or something. So I feel like maybe his whole, face turn is going to revolve around him realizing that like not everyone is like that. Like not every human feels like they're above monsters or something like that. And he's going to kind of be on Team Saitama at the end versus the God Cadre. Now, there obviously isn't really much to substantiate that. Like there's nothing that we haven't even seen in the webcomic that, any semblance of a face turn on his part. But I just feel like that would be so satisfying to see, aside from him just like staying evil and getting buffed up by God and becoming Diamond S that way. Like it would be so awesome to see Black S become Diamond S or something and like sacrifice himself or something for, the good of humanity and kind of have that, that really awesome character arc come full circle for him. So, like I said, it's very hopeful on my part. There's no real evidence to back it up, but that's just my, personal belief on where I think Black S is going as a character.
No, I totally feel you. And I wouldn't say that there's like no evidence, like it just doesn't make sense. I think it does, because right now it's like, teeter-tottering Black S in the webcomic. Yes, he doesn't seem like has an altruistic purpose in mind. Like I'm going to help people. Obviously obviously it's not like that, but I would say right now it's like one wants us to not know, because like, yeah, I mean, it would be cool if you came Cosmic S or Diamond S or whatever. It seems like it's supposed to happen, right? And that's why the swerve last minute face turn would really be incredible, because also Black S is like one of the most liked characters in the series, maybe. I mean, he has one of the best personalities, I think. So
yeah, definitely,
he's worthy of it.
And his power is really awesome. You know what I mean? Like, there's no other character like him in the story. Like,
now that you mention that,
broken.
There's no other character like him, and I think because he was like made, like I don't think he was originally a human that became a monster. Like, I think he's like born a monster from God. And let me show you this panel, because this might make you see the way that I see. So this is before Black S is swatted by Metal Bat. And it's like, floating. Yeah. And then you see the core of him.
Right.
He looks like God.
Like God. Definitely. Now that you mentioned that, I think you talked about this before, like a while ago, but there's this one panel. I forgot exactly what chapter it's in, but I think it's when one of like the, lowly monsters in the Monster Association is like kind of explaining introducing, I think, like the monster cadre. And I forgot the exact wording, but it goes, there you go. They're like God's own works of art. And it gives you like those two faces of what God can create. Like, he can create straight up monsters like from scratch, and he can also influence others and give them some of his power. So those are like the two ways that he can kind of, create these ultra powerful beings in the story, which, I mean, you had it perfectly right there,
Yeah, I mean, he's even in front of the moon.
Definitely heavily alludes to it.
He's in front
exactly.
Of the moon.
I mean, what more do we want, right?
All right, so the next one, another wild card for this Gods team. Whoever has the Moon Sword, which I assume is evil Atomic Samurai. So anybody who's confused by that, let me just explain it real quick. So back in the Monster Association cadre battle, I think it was like chapter 148, somewhere around there, as Nichiren was dying, who was also apparently Atomic Samurai's master, or was his master, he pulls this sword out of like some kind of dimension in his necklace. I don't know. I kind of have issues with that sequence, but that's a topic for another time. He pulls this sword out and he's like, hey, this is the Sun Blade. It's super powerful. Here you go, Atomic Samurai. But there's also a Moon Blade out there, and you got to go find it, because if you have the Moon Blade and the Sun Blade, you're pretty much God level, or at least that's the implications. Obviously Nichiren didn't say God level, but you guys know what I'm trying to get across here. So I'm thinking that the Moon Blade isn't like something that needs to be found. I think somebody has it, and it, like I said, it's the evil equivalent of Atomic Samurai. It's the swordsman who accepted God's influence, pretty much, and I think this was already shown to us before, because I think it was like chapter 69, and that's why I remember it, because it's chapter 69. But I think that was the chapter when Council of Swordsmen are first introduced, and they have like their meeting, and Harakiri reveals that he had eaten a monster cell, and then he attacks Atomic, of course. I think that is the precursor to what the true story of going on with like the swordsman in the One Punch Man world was. Like, there's always been like a Council of Swordsmen, and it's been replaced, as the years goes on. And I think at some point back in the day, there was a defector like Harakiri, and he's the guy with the Moon Blade, and he's also one of God's disciples, obviously. Then that will be Atomic Samurai's final opponent, and then once he defeats him, he'll get the Moon Blade, and then Atomic will be so unbelievably powerful at that point, to where I think he'll be one of the key players who like is fighting against God at that point, I guess. And if not Saitama by himself.
He definitely needs that buff too, because I just feel like he's getting passed by the other like S-class heroes, but not all of them, but some of them.
Oh yeah,
and
big time.
Yeah, it would make perfect sense that he has like that final opponent that's just like semi-monster-fied ultimate samurai that he has this like big epic battle with to get the Moonblade. And I mean, it's specifically because it's like a new addition to the manga, so I feel like one kind of realized like he has to give Atomic Samurai his like own specific final opponent, and I think that's kind of how he decided to set it up, was trying to look for the Moonblade and inadvertently running into these God cadres. That's going to be a big cog at the end of the series for sure.
Yeah, I just hope he has something for the disciples as well.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be great if it was like an evil council of swordsmen or something, so it's kind of like a good samurai council versus evil samurai council. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, and that seems likely at this point. Also because it'll bring us to the final member of this team here, the Ninja Village leader. So like you were saying, there's probably evil samurais, like a team of them or whatever. Well, you already saw that there's like a team of evil ninjas, probably evil samurais as well, but I'll let you take this one because you actually brought this to my attention. Why the Ninja Village leader? It could potentially actually be on this team.
Yeah, and I more so believe it too, just because, like, you know, if for webcomic readers, the fact that he just got done in so quickly and so easily, I feel like either that's not it for him, or one is kind of taking a step back and kind of giving him a much bigger role in the story. And, you know, seeing as how a lot of people have also theorized that the mysterious guy with like the sunglasses and the two swords on his back in the Blast flashback when he first meets God, that, you know, potentially could be the ninja leader. But aside from that, you know, the fact that like they built him up to be this like insanely powerful person that's like lived hundreds of years and has like multiple heartbeats and is pretty much a monster in his own right, it would just make sense that like he would be Flashy Flash's final opponent, along with Vita Sound Sonic or something, where he's, you know, kind of like either maybe taken out in a similar way that he is in the webcomic with just like a one shot from Saitama and eventually comes back, or that gets completely scrapped altogether and like he's kind of saved for the very end. Because, you know, not to get too much into the whole theory stuff, but it's also kind of theorized that the fact that like Ninja Village looks like a cube, you know, like the way the building looks, or, you know, the way the village looks, that at some point, like the reason he is the way he is, living for so long and being able to like pretty much harvest organs for, you know, longevity and power, that he might have kind of struck some deal with God like at some point in the past. And, you know, he's going to just keep powering up until this like inevitable meeting at the end of the series for the ninjas in the Flashy Flash and Speed of Sound Sonic, like I said. And that I think that would be their perfect opponent, you know. And who knows, maybe if it turns out to be Blast, you know, friend that's somehow transformed at some point, maybe like Blast kind of has a hand in this, you know, whole altercation, seeing as how, you know, Flashy Flash already met Blast personally. So it would kind of make sense because they already kind of have that rapport, and it would just kind of flow nicely, you know.
Absolutely. Blast has to be a part of this. I mean, he will be, but I'm saying like he has to interact with them, because also he has a story with Sonic, which is crazy to think about. Like Blast has a history with Sonic. It's like, yeah, Sonic's whole story revolves around Blast, kind of.
Yeah, right. And again, yeah, that's perfect. That's like a perfect way for it to like come full circle, where like Blast, Sonic, Flashy Flash, and the Ninja Leader are all connected. And, you know, we kind of get a good background story as to exactly why it is that Blast came and like pretty much took out the whole Ninja Village in one night. And man, I just thinking about it definitely hypes me up. I really hope that that's the direction that they go in, for sure.
Yeah, for anyone that's just confused about that, Sonic, when he was like a teenager or something, allegedly saw Blast come to the Ninja Village and like slaughter everyone, like children, it doesn't matter, like he killed everyone. And like Sonic was able to flee from that, but it like shaped like who he is as a person more so. There's a lot of things that go into who Sonic is now, but it was like that incident that really sparked Sonic to who he is now. So like we're gonna have that moment where Blast is like explains himself pretty much to Sonic,
right?
So yeah, I'm super excited for that. And yeah, that's pretty much it for it. We've got theorized God's team here: Fuzzy, Psychos, Apollo, Phoenix Man, Drive Knight, Black S, Moonsword Samurai, and the Ninja Village leader. Our Psychos' final opponent would be Fubuki, Apollo's would be Tatsumaki, Phoenix Man, Child Emperor, Drive Knight, Genos, and then Moonsword Samurai, Atomic, and then the Ninja Village leader, Flashy and Sonic. That's pretty much it. So yeah, check out Anime Anxiety's channel for some awesome One Punch Man, Chainsaw Man content. I'm sure you're working on some other stuff too, but yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
See you guys in the next one.